Hello everyone, this is Allison Eicher and I will be your librarian for the research component of RWA. The class format will be what I like to call semi-flipped. This format was well received last year and results in you spending less time out of class working on my assignments and more time working with your other courses. That does not mean that this isn't important. I expect you to come to class prepared, having listened to the lectures. The format only works when you're actively engaged in the class. The format will work something like this. You will start by listening to these short voiceover PowerPoint lectures, and then when we meet in our face-to-face sessions, we'll go through an exercise together that illustrates the resources that were discussed in the lecture. You will then be sent on your way with a homework assignment that either expands or continues on from the in-class assignment, or an assignment that in some way supplements what we covered that day in class. That portion that you complete at home will be turned into me and will be graded. I'll return the copies back to you with comments and a grade. At our first face-to-face meeting, I'll discuss the syllabus and grading in more detail. Please know that I really aim to create a classroom atmosphere that encourages open dialogue, a lot of questions, and a really relaxed atmosphere. I won't be using the Socratic method, but I do expect you to show up to class having listened to the materials and be ready to participate. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact me before class. My email address is listed and you can sometimes find me at the reference desk of the library. Don't hesitate to ask at the circulation desk and they can direct you to my office. The purpose of the research component of RWA is to expose you to actual legal research problems. Legal research is so much more important than one might think, and mastery of the tools at your disposal will make you a more efficient attorney. It's important not to disregard the importance of legal research. In the practice of law, the stakes are high. Shortcuts and incompetence could cost you your reputation, money, or even your license to practice. This is the research bullseye and really just shows you all of the resources that are available to the legal researcher. You can also look at it as a sort of roadmap. You start in the outer ring with secondary sources, and the information you find there will lead you to primary sources in the second ring. Finally, you'll update and verify that what you found is still good law. The bullseye is really your final step and should never be overlooked. You're going to hear stories of the ill-prepared attorney who showed up to court without updating their research or shepherdizing their case, only to be shot down by opposing counsel, or even worse, a judge who knows that the case was overruled. It's easy to forget to update your research, but a final check the day of or before submitting a brief or showing up in court is well worth it. There are two basic types of legal sources, primary and secondary. Primary sources or authority are cases, constitutions, statutes, and administrative regulations. The authority we're going to be talking about today and in our first class is secondary authority. And in short, that's everything that is not primary authority. Now you need a plan, a legal research strategy. You should always start with a plan. We're going to address it here a little bit and then we'll revisit it throughout the component and then again at the end. When I start, I reword the research question, or at the very least, I write the question down. This helps me identify search terms. Identifying search terms can be particularly difficult, especially when you're new to the law. Once you're more familiar with an area of the law and legal terms generally, you still may encounter difficulties. And so that's why it's really important to learn how to use secondary sources. They'll help you develop that vocabulary. Once you've identified your search terms, you'll then identify secondary sources. We're going to talk about the different types of secondary sources today and in class, but that is your next step. The secondary sources will help inform your search of primary authorities and will also give you new terms to add to your vocabulary list. After you've reviewed secondary sources, then you'll begin your research of primary authorities or sources. You'll want to identify which primary sources of law you'll look at. Will you start looking for cases right away, or should you look for statutes? Are you looking at federal jurisdiction or state? These will be questions that you'll have to answer and really should answer before you start your research. This will make your research more efficient. Over the next few weeks, we'll discuss the different types of sources, and I just want you to keep this concept of research strategy in the back of your head. Everyone does this differently, but developing a plan of attack is very important. There's no process written in stone for how to complete legal research. There are many suggestions, but you're going to develop your own way of doing things. Until then, when you're starting research, I suggest that you follow the steps listed. Start with a secondary source to familiarize yourself with the topic, then research the primary authority that you learned about from the secondary source, then verify and update to make sure that what you found is still relevant and good law. The law is very fact-specific. The difference in one seemingly minor fact can and will change the outcome of a case. It's important to be able to recognize relevant facts in order to conduct your research and to be an effective practitioner. Most of you, if not all of you, are accustomed to searching Google by typing in your question directly. This is called natural language searching and has probably been pretty effective for you. Westlaw and Lexis allow you to do natural language searches. However, there can be a more efficient way to research, and that's by constructing a Boolean search string. This is what had to be done when I learned to use Westlaw and Lexis, so it's what I frequently do just out of habit. I've listed some examples here, and this is not an exclusive list by any means, and each database is going to have different operators. We're going to work with this a little bit and discuss, and I'll have a YouTube video that I recommend you watch just to give you an idea of how these operators work. Secondary sources can provide the foundation upon which you build your legal research. Secondary sources can do all that I've listed, but can also expand your overall knowledge of the law. I quote from Osbeck's Impeccable Research First Edition. The other, somewhat hidden benefit to regularly using secondary sources to acquire background information at the beginning of your research is that, in the long run, the practice makes you a more knowledgeable lawyer. Why? Because when you try to actually learn something about the topics you are researching, instead of just finding the answers to the narrow questions you're assigned, over time you begin to weave together an understanding of the law as a whole that continues to grow the longer you practice and the more you learn about individual topics. This Gestalt view of the law will serve you well as you transition from a beginning lawyer who researches specific legal problems to a seasoned counselor whose sage advice clients actively seek out. This slide really explains itself. There will be times, like when you have become very familiar with an area of law, that you won't need to reference secondary sources. However, just starting out in legal research or in an area of law later in your career, secondary sources can be invaluable. Please keep in mind that there are ways you should not use secondary sources. You will almost never cite to secondary sources in briefs, only in very rare circumstances. Use the secondary sources to lead you to primary authority, which you can then cite. So we'll talk briefly about some of the sources available. Our in-class work will illustrate the use of these resources. Legal dictionaries. When you don't know what a word means, you know to look in the dictionary. Well, there are dictionaries specific to the law. So if you want to know what a word means in the legal sense, you look to a legal dictionary. Examples are Black's Law Dictionary and Ballantyne's. These are available electronically through Westlaw or Lexis, and they're also available in print. Legal encyclopedias. Think back to grade school and writing a small research paper. You probably used an encyclopedia. Well, we have them in the law, and they can be immensely helpful in helping you understand the law and then lead you to primary authority. American Law Reports. Each semester I struggle to differentiate between American Law Reports and legal encyclopedias. That is, they're so similar to me that I feel strange making a differentiation. However, ALRs are meant to provide information on unsettled areas of the law. That is, areas where circuit splits may exist. So perhaps the Sixth Circuit has decided that you can shoot your neighbor without cause, and the Ninth Circuit has decided that you can't. Well, you're in the Third Circuit, and the Third Circuit hasn't had an opinion yet. You could go to the ALR on the topic and use the resources contained therein to find explanations and primary authority to help draft a persuasive argument either way. Otherwise, I find ALRs provide helpful articles with good information. Case law citations are provided, but my understanding is that newer editions are doing away with these citations. Treatises. Students commonly confuse treatises with treaties. I even frequently write down one when I really mean the other. Treatises can be a very valuable resource by providing historical information as well as current awareness on a specific topic. They sometimes serve as a be-all and end-all and can lead you to primary authority. So if you're researching a question on insurance law, it would benefit you to track down a copy of Couch on Insurance. Restatements. These are similar to legal encyclopedias in that they tend to summarize the law. However, the restatements are often more highly regarded by the courts. Restatements are drafted by highly respected scholars and under a rigorous drafting and approval process. They are topic specific, and I remember them best from contracts. Just remember they are not the law. This may make a little bit more sense when we discuss uniform laws. Uniform laws and model acts can be a little confusing. You're going to hear a lot about them in your classes. Think contracts and the UCC or Uniform Commercial Code. Note that these are just uniform acts. They are recommendations, and it is up to individual legislatures to adopt these for their jurisdictions. They are secondary authority because they are not the actual law. If you wish to cite the primary law, then you need to go to your jurisdiction and find where the uniform law has been adopted and cite to that jurisdiction's law. The uniform law can be persuasive, though, and the information related to the development of the uniform laws can provide good information. Legal periodicals or law journals can be great sources of information. They can provide long historical analyses or discussions of up-and-coming changes in the law. For practical purposes, though, law reviews may not be that helpful. And what I mean by this is that if you're in practice and are trying to figure out how to handle a client situation, the law review may just not have good advice on how to handle the situation. They're mostly academic. However, if your local bar association has a journal, they may have articles with more practical information. So why would I even say that legal periodicals are helpful? Law reviews are filled with footnotes and citations, and they're great when you're trying to locate a source. Legal periodical indexes are merely tools one can use to locate law review articles. We're going to work with one in our in-class assignment. Library catalogs. We won't necessarily look at the library catalog in our in-class exercise or in our homework, but don't be afraid to use it. At some point, I'm going to show you how to use the catalog because it can be very helpful, especially if you're on law review or when you complete your ULWR. So to briefly recap, secondary sources can provide you helpful analysis that will guide your understanding of the law. Secondary sources can help you master the vocabulary or learn the terms of art. Secondary sources can also lead you to primary sources, which you can then cite. These sources may lead you to other secondary sources, which provide additional information and further serve to educate you. These are just some points to remember throughout the research process. You're going to develop your own process as you go. Just let these be a guide when you feel you've lost your way. We've come to the end of our first lecture. I like this quote, and it's something I always keep in mind when I'm writing. I just thought I'd share. If you have any questions, please contact me. I'll see you in class.